Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for your testimony today. We've all been shocked at the scenes from the Midwest of the massive flooding and devastation, and it has affected the livelihood, the lives of the thousands and thousands of our fellow Americans. We will respond. We must respond with emergency support for them to rebuild bridges and rebuild roads. But we want to make sure we do it in a sustainable way, because these used to be sort of one-off experiences. When you have a 100-year flood every 3 years, you've got to wonder what's going on. And one of the aspects of this is the fact that in 2017, the administration eliminated the federal flood risk management standard, which was a guidelines for reconstructing bridges and infrastructure so they could be sustainable given the climate change effects. And that basically invites some states, particularly under fiscal pressure, to simply put up what they had before, not take into consideration the climate effects, the changing aspects of this. And this issue of climate is not just the Midwest, so that's the current disaster. And again, we are absolutely sympathetic with the people who are suffering out there. But we were talking about the Northeast Corridor. If you drive the train from here to Providence, Rhode Island, you will go past coastline, which is being slowly eroded by rising seas. You'll go through areas where the wetlands are becoming more and more threatening to the tracks. That's going to be a huge cost that Amtrak will have to face. So the point is, how will you and the department ensure that these transportation projects are built and properly located and designed to withstand what we know is coming, the effects of climate change, the rising waters?
Well, I think the resiliency of infrastructure is very important to be prepared for natural disasters of any sort. And so we need to work to ensure that that infrastructure projects are able to meet these these unusual circumstances. So the federal highways has supported pilot projects to see how we can increase the resiliency. And I think FHWA has supported about 40 resiliency pilot projects across the country, and they've initiated 11 state and metropolitan pilot projects focused on making transportation more resilient and more durable.
Well, I appreciate that, but again, we have to rebuild all these structures in the Midwest, and not just the Midwest, all across the country. And if we don't have a governing rule, then pilot projects are helpful, but they won't be decisive. So I'd urge you to move either to reevaluate the decision to repeal that regulation or guidance, or to put in new, more effective guidance in your view. Let me change topics for a moment. You probably might be aware that we suffered up in Rhode Island a gas outage affecting 10,000 Rhode Islanders in Newport, Middletown, and Portsmouth, Aquidneck Island. And we have been working with the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, to understand how it happened. It was a multi-state occurrence, so there's involvement in the federal government as well as the local government. Could you give us an update on what you've learned to date and the pending investigation of what went wrong and what we have to correct?
PHMSA is extremely experienced and professional, and their highly trained inspectors concluded that the high customer demand for natural gas during the stretch of extreme cold, combined with an emergency shutdown of a liquefied natural gas facility, created conditions leading to the outage. PHMSA actually doesn't regulate gas supply matters, but the department, because the Rhode Island governor, your governor, had declared a state of emergency, PHMSA staff immediately reached out to the Rhode Island Division of Public Utilities and Carriers and tried to work with them.
This just raises, I think, a more general issue, not just for Rhode Island, but these pipelines are all typically interstate pipelines, and PHMSA has regulatory authority because of the interstate nature. Then you have state public utility commissions in Rhode Island and other states, Usually, the responsibility is shared in some respects. In fact, what we're told is some of the problems occurred in the Massachusetts site, but it affected Rhode Island and not Massachusetts. So one of the things I think we have to do is develop a standard procedure where PHMSA is working with state utility commissions in a proactive way, not just simply reactive. I appreciate them coming to the assistance of Rhode Island.
And we're still working with them.
Yes, and so that when there is an outage, it's almost like maybe the analogy we've been talking about all morning, the NTSB, where when something happens, they're there on the ground, they're coordinating the response, almost FEMA-like too. When something happens, FEMA's on the ground with the local emergency management. It's just that this incident, and frankly, we're very fortunate in Rhode Island, there were no casualties as there were a few weeks before that in Massachusetts where there was a gas explosion. So we were very grateful for that. But 10,000 people were without heat, a major city in the state closed down for several weeks. I think we do have to have much more of a coherent and constant coordination between PHMSA and the state utility commissions, and I would urge you to look into that.
I understand.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.